Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by again. Look, if you've been active on the left on the internet, you've heard this argument that identity politics is a quote-unquote distraction from our key work of socialists, of leftists, of people trying to challenge capitalism. But I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. And I don't want this video to be a call-out video or a drama video, but I just want to offer my quick perspective on why talking about identity politics, aka being intersectional with our approach to social injustice, we can actually build a stronger and more representative movement of people who want to challenge capitalist society and build something better. Look, the reality is that if we want to show this key aspect of leftism, known as solidarity, we have to put our money where our mouth is. And we can't just go to people who are marginalized because they are women or people of color or disabled or what have you, and say to them, work on our movements, and then we'll figure out yours. That's not solidarity. It's not solidarity at all. Solidarity is trying to find a way to intertwine our struggles, to fight the many-headed hydra of social injustice. And class, maybe it is the biggest head on that hydra, but it's not the only one. And for a lot of people, it may not be the biggest one. For some people in their day-to-day lives, racism might be a bigger, immediate concern. And we need to realize that while all of these things are indeed intertwined within capitalism, within liberal capitalist society, we cannot expect people to show solidarity with us as socialists if we are not willing to show solidarity to them and their struggles for other forms of liberation. It's not reasonable and it's not fair. Further to that, the reality is that if we want to build a working class movement, we need to understand what the working class is. And in countries like Canada and the United States, I have to say, the working class is not this idealized version of, white male industrial workers. They're part of the working class, but the working class today, as a proportion, is more women than men. And people of color and LGBTQ people are more likely to be working class than white people or straight people. At the end of the day then, when we talk about, we have to build a working class movement and fight for working class concerns, these issues of racism and sexism and homophobia are by definition working class issues. You can't separate them. You can't separate the exploitation that a working class woman faces from misogyny. They are deeply intertwined. You cannot separate the experience of a working class person of color from racism. They are deeply intertwined. You cannot separate the experience of a working class person with a disability from ableism. They are deeply intertwined. You can't do it. And to say class first is I think a form of erasure. It's a form of erasure of real working class experiences. I know when people say that sometimes, what they're trying to say is look, they're making a good faith criticism of liberal intersectionality, of progressive wokeism that doesn't actually address the issues at hand. And I'm sympathetic to that, and I understand that. But the reality is that socialists, we need to offer what woke progressivism doesn't, which is genuine intersectionality. That includes class in a way liberalism doesn't, but that does not ignore the other forms of struggle that are essential to building a just and more democratic social order. We can't ignore that. The working class is more diverse and is more intersectional than the elite class is. And as such, we need to be more sensitive, more perceptive of those issues. We cannot build a working class movement that does not talk about those things. We can't. And further to that, we cannot build a working class movement, one, that doesn't talk about those issues, but two, that even doesn't center them as central issues. Those forms of politics are vital. Identity politics are not a distraction in that context. They are our way of understanding the various forms of identity within the broad and diverse working class. If we want to build a socialist and working class movement, we need to have a real understanding of the motivations and makeup of the working class. And we won't do that without a real and meaningful discussion of those identities and how they intersect with the exploitation under capitalism. That's not a distraction. That's the nuts and bolts work we need to do on the ground, day to day. Because ultimately, when push comes to shove, if we want to be successful at building a broad working class movement, we have to meet people where they are. And where people are at times is dealing with multiple forms of oppression and multiple forms of struggle. And we can't go into communities and demand that they center our struggle first and then we'll get to theirs. That's not good enough. People are dealing with life and death issues right now that revolve around racism and sexism and homophobia. And because of that, we cannot in any good conscience demand from those people that they set those things aside, set the identity politics aside, and come on the class first, class reductionist bandwagon. We can't in any good conscience do that. It's not effective and it's not right. And a lot of this is based in history, guys. Like, a lot of this is tactical. For a long time, trade unions really didn't reach the majority of the working class. And one of the reasons, there's a whole bunch of reasons. One was craft unions didn't want to organize the quote-unquote unskilled people. But a big factor was that organizers didn't represent the communities they were in. In effect, they only talked about bread and butter, quote-unquote, trade union issues, or class reductionists, and failed to recognize the importance of ethnicity and language and religion in their struggle. So what did some successful unions do? Well, my goodness, they looked at identity politics and they started hiring people who understood the identities of the people they were trying to organize. So they went into the Jewish community with Jewish organizers. They went into the Italian community with Italian organizers. They spoke to Catholics with people who were Catholic. They intertwined themselves within ethnic and social organizations not strictly connected to trade unionism or socialism. And they were successful. Maybe not always, and maybe not to the ultimate extent that we built a socialist society, but they found success in a way a pure, trade unionist slash intellectual socialist alone model never would have. And today we're seeing that new forms of organization of the working class that include women of color and people from migrant communities are much more successful than movements that don't, because people from those identities need to see themselves represented. If our movement is not seen as representative of the broad working class, then people of that broad working class not represented in our movement, they won't trust us. And we can't blame them for not trusting us. Again, I'm not calling anyone out in particular, but I want you guys to come away with this and think about this a little bit. You may not ultimately agree with me, but if you're one of these, identity politics is bad types, and you want to just kind of poo-poo any kind of socialist alliance with movements against racism and sexism and homophobia, please understand that that's only hamstringing us. That's only making us look like the caricature that the liberal progressives paint us as. And that only limits our ultimate ability to understand and mobilize and energize the broad working class.